The skiff lurched so violently that Erik dropped to his knees, knuckles white against the side railing of the boat as cold spray slapped his face. For a heartbeat, the boat seemed to hang on its edge, ready to spill him into the black water. Beneath him, something vast moved with terrifying purpose, the sea heaving in its wake. Then came the sound, low, steady, unnatural. It thrummed through the wood into his chest, deeper than any whale's call. Erik yanked at the starter cord with frantic jerks, but the engine only coughed and died. Another swell rose under him, lifting the skiff high, tilting so far his boots filled with seawater. He was certain this was how it would end. On the third pull, the motor roared awake. He slammed the throttle wide, the skiff leaping forward across the dark, spray burning his eyes. Behind him, the water bulged again as though something chased just beneath the surface. Erik didn't look back. He gripped the tiller with shaking hands and drove for the faint lights of the village, convinced each second might be his last. But before we start, smash the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. Erik had been on the water for as long as he could remember. His father had taught him to handle a skiff before he'd even learned to drive, and now, in his 30s, fishing was the only work he trusted to keep food on the table. He wasn't the wealthiest man in the village, but he was steady, practical, and known for rolling his eyes at drama. The village itself was small, barely 300 people living along a weather-beaten coast. Rusting trucks lined the harbor road, boats swayed against their moorings, and the smell of diesel mixed with salt and seaweed. There wasn't much to do except fish, talk about fishing, or complain about the market price of fish, which was why the latest rumor had spread so fast. People swore there was something in the water, something big enough to upend boats, something that scared fish away and left nets empty. Nobody had seen it clearly, of course. It was always a shadow or a shape or something huge under the boat. The stories were consistent enough to make the more cautious fishers stay ashore. Fishermen had always been superstitious, and with reason. The sea was dangerous work, and a man who didn't respect its mysteries often didn't come back. Erik wasn't buying it. "Come on," he told the guys at the Harbor Cafe one morning, sipping cheap coffee from a paper cup. "If there's no fish, blame overfishing or bad currents, not sea monsters. This isn't a movie." A couple of younger deckhands laughed, but the older men just stared at him, unconvinced. Marta, who ran the fish counter at the local market, shook her head when he stopped by. "Keep laughing, Erik. It'll be you tipping over next." She said it with the bluntness of someone who'd seen too many accidents at sea. He smirked, tapped the brim of his cap, and told her to save him a space on the ice table for tomorrow's catch. The truth was, his trip that morning had been fine, more than fine. His bins were full before noon. He'd steered back into the harbor, sunburned and grinning, calling out to anyone listening, "Looks like the monster forgot to eat me." A couple of teenagers clapped sarcastically, but most people just looked away. The mood on shore was too heavy for jokes. "It doesn't show up during the day," Marta muttered later when he passed her stall again. "It comes when the church bell rings at night. That's when Tomas lost his gear. That's when Anders said he felt something pull at his oar." Erik rolled his eyes but felt a twinge of unease, not because he believed her, but because of how carefully she'd said it, like the sea itself might be listening. Pride wouldn't let him leave it there, and besides, if everyone else was too afraid to fish at dusk, then he'd have the waters to himself. Fewer boats meant less competition, maybe fuller nets. His father had died in a storm years ago, and Erik had grown up knowing that the sea didn't need legends to kill you. But he also knew how to handle himself, how to keep a boat steady and chop, how to read a dark patch of water before it broke into a wave. He trusted skill, not stories, so when dusk came, he untied his skiff. The church bell rang out over the village, deep and heavy. Most people shut their doors. Erik just adjusted the strap of his life vest, flicked on his running light, and pushed off. The outboard coughed once, then steadied, carrying him out into open water. The sea felt strange. No gulls circled. The surface looked stretched flat, almost artificial, the way a pond goes still before someone throws a rock. He eased back on the throttle, letting the engine settle into a low hum. The silence pressed harder with every yard he drifted. He killed the engine over the shelf where the current usually brought in herring. His lamp lit a pale circle of water, plankton flashing like static. The nets hung slack. Nothing moved. Then the skiff jolted, not from chop, but from something that touched the boat everywhere at once. The hull, the motor, even his boots. A low vibration ran through the wood and into his bones. He braced, crouched low, and leaned over the side. A massive shadow streaked beneath him. It was too clean, too precise, not the bulk of a whale or the flutter of a ray. The skiff lurched sideways, water piling up in a swell that had no wind behind it. For one terrifying second, he thought he was going over. Then the boat slammed back down, rattling, and the water was smooth again. The shadow streaked beneath the skiff, and in an instant, the world tilted. The boat lurched violently, one side lifting as if unseen hands were prying it over. Panic surged. He yanked the starter cord repeatedly, each pull straining his shoulder. The motor coughed, caught, then died. Finally, the engine roared back to life. Erik slammed the throttle open, and the skiff surged forward, slicing through the dark. The village lights blinked faintly ahead. His hands ached from clenching the tiller. He reached the shallows and cut the engine only when the hull scraped bottom. Without tying the boat, he vaulted over, stumbled, and ran up the beach. Behind him, the sea lay still. No ripple, no sign, just calm. But Erik knew what had passed beneath him and how close it had come. It hadn't moved like a whale. He told himself it was gone, but his gaze stayed on the horizon. Ahead, the village lights beckoned. He longed to slip home, unseen. But in a town this small, someone always saw. As he passed the first homes, faces appeared in doorways, voices carried in the night air. 2 teenagers leaned outside the cafe, grinning. "There he is," one called. "The monster chased him home!" Laughter broke out. Erik kept his head down, boots slapping the pavement too loudly. More doors opened. The whispers spread faster than the tide. Marta stood on her porch, arms crossed. "What did I tell you? The sea doesn't lie. You mocked us, and now you've had your lesson." "I didn't see anything," he said quickly. "Just a swell." His voice cracked. Laughter followed. Jaw clenched, Erik walked on, forcing himself to look steady. "So," one said, "did you meet our monster?" Laughter rolled through the room. Erik forced a smirk. "The only thing out there tonight was empty water," he lied. "You all hear what you want to hear." Marta's eyes narrowed. "Funny," she said, "how empty water leaves a man white as chalk." He ignored her, finished his coffee, and stepped back into the night. The next morning at the dock, his skiff bobbed quietly. As he checked his gear, he noticed a rainbow sheen drifting from beneath the hull, oily and metallic. He touched it, smelled it wrong, not sea oil, not fuel. If the others saw it, they'd spin more tales. But Erik knew no fish or storm left traces like this. That hum, that oily film, clues, thin as mist, but enough to keep him up at night. Something out there didn't belong, and Erik couldn't stop thinking about it. The village carried on, wrapped in fear and superstition. Boats left less often. Nets hung untouched. Marta scattered salt. Others tied talismans of driftwood and rope. Erik tried to laugh it off, but the sound felt hollow. That low, steady hum pulsed in his chest like something breathing beneath him. At first, he called it natural, but the more he replayed it, the more wrong it felt. Too even, too mechanical. One night, he saw a line of bubbles break the surface, perfectly spaced, a dozen meters long. He froze. Nothing natural breathed in straight lines. Villagers noticed his behavior. Marta scolded him for lingering at the breakwater. "You'll be the first it takes," she warned. He didn't answer. He didn't believe in monsters, but he knew something was there. Tension built. Nets came back empty. Some claimed the fish were gone, driven off. Others spoke of shadows too large to be normal. Erik grew methodical. Each evening, notebook in hand, he walked the cliffs or the shore. What began as instinct became observation. He felt the hum at certain times. Ripples formed when the water should have been still. Slowly, patterns emerged. At dusk, the water bulged. Near midnight, faint bubbles traced straight lines. Just before dawn, the gulls avoided a specific patch above the shelf. Erik noted it all dates, times, conditions. His notebook filled quickly. Within a week, he was sure. Whatever surfaced did so regularly. The next morning, he slammed the notebook on a cafe table. "I've been watching," he declared. "It comes at the same times. Dusk, midnight, dawn. This isn't random. It's scheduled." Silence, then laughter. One man scoffed, "The sea wears a watch now?" Another joked about bedtime stories. Even Marta shook her head. "The sea doesn't follow rules. It takes what it wants." The room stirred. Most mocked him. That evening, the village lined the shore. Some waited with skepticism, others with silent tension. Erik stood front and center, notebook in hand. "Watch the water," he said. Marta folded her arms. "And when nothing comes?" The bell rang. At first, nothing. The water was calm, silver in the fading light. Smirks spread. A few turned to leave. Then a sound began low, deep, humming through the sand. It rose, vibrating the air itself. All eyes snapped to the bay as the surface trembled. Something emerged slow, deliberate, not a creature, but something vast and black, catching the last light in hard gleams. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A glossy surface rose higher, too clean to be skin. Steel, not scales. Then a tower pushed up, angular, marked with antennae. Lights blinked faintly. A hatch opened. Two figures climbed out human, uniformed. One waved toward shore. Shock silenced the villagers. The figures disappeared. The hatch closed. The vessel sank smoothly. In moments, it was gone. For a long beat, no one moved. Then Erik spoke, calm and firm. "Not a monster, a machine, always was." "Why weren't we warned?" someone murmured. More joined in, fear turning to frustration. But no answers came. By morning, the story had spread. News outlets reported a foreign submarine surfacing unannounced near a fishing village. Experts debated treaties, errors, and diplomatic consequences. Their quiet town was briefly thrust onto the global stage. But none of that mattered to those who'd stood on the shore. What stayed with them was the image of a black hull rising like a leviathan, revealing not myth but something colder and more real, the hidden machinery of nations brushing against their world. Erik lingered after the others left. Vindicated, yes, but not comforted. The sea had once been dangerous in ways he could understand: storms, currents, nature's fury. But now it held secrets crafted by human hands, massive and silent, waiting just below the surface. That, he thought grimly, was its own kind of monster.